Alright, today we're going to talk about race starts and some of the baseline fundamentals to getting a good start. We're not going to dive super deep into all the tactics and techniques, but we'll instead just kind of focus on the two main ideas, starting on the correct side of the start line and also starting on the correct tack. Alright, so let's just establish a few baseline givens for any normal start. In a perfect world, the course will be set up so the wind is coming directly down the course, with the windward buoy directly upwind of the start line. In reality, the buoy would be much further upwind, but this is just kind of showing the relative placement of the buoy in terms of the start line, which is centered. The second given is that it will always be better to start in the first row right on the start line versus the second row. In a situation like this, where you are in the second row, you're going to be in the dirty air of everyone upwind of you, which will make it really hard to win back places. Okay, with those things in mind, what we're going to dive into in this video is mainly 1, choosing what side of the start line is favored, right or left. The reason that's important is because depending on where the wind is coming from, starting on one side versus the other is going to be part of the puzzle for helping us sail upwind and get closer to the buoy in relation to the rest of the fleet. Number 2 will be what tack do we want to start on, starboard or port, which one is favored. And that's really going to be the other part of the puzzle to help us get upwind as quickly and efficiently as possible. And then 3 is going to be how can we determine exactly where the wind is coming from while on the start line. Putting all of that info together can lead to really great starts, which then sets you up really well for the rest of the race. It's also really not that difficult with some practice, so it's just great info to know for anyone that's looking to race. Okay, so we've already established that in an ideal world, the start line is perpendicular to the wind, which is coming straight down the course, with the windward buoy directly upwind. We want to kind of consider this the status quo or the starting point for any further decisions. So in this scenario, there isn't technically a favored side of the start line, right or left. Regardless of whether you start on the right side or the left, both boats, all things being equal, will get to the buoy at roughly the same time. Here we have 2 boats, one on the right and on starboard, one on the left and on port. As they move the same distance up the course, you'll see that they both look as if they're going to ultimately make it to the buoy. Once again, the buoy would actually be further upwind than it is for this demonstration, but the principle is the same. So both boats are going to make it to the buoy, but there will be a point where they get close to a collision, in which case we know the starboard boat has rights over the port boat. It's because of this that we can safely assume that in the normal situation, with the wind coming directly down the course, the right side of the line is favored, as is starboard tack. Here we have the wind coming directly down the course. All the boats are on starboard, and we're likely fighting for that key spot on the right side of the line. Ultimately, though, only one boat can get it. So if we look at the hypothetical course for the boat in the best position, we can see that it's going to lead them directly to the buoy, so they're in great shape. If we move down the line one boat, we can see their course is still pretty good, takes them close to the buoy, but they're likely going to have to do some tacking to make it there. The pattern continues the further down the line you move to the left. The right side is favored, which means the further left you are, the worst position you're potentially in versus our key boat, which is the only one going to make it to the buoy or need to travel the least amount of distance. Another benefit of being on the right in the best spot is clean air. Almost all the rest of the fleet is sandwiched between 2 boats or has someone to windward of them, which means they'll really be fighting to get good clean air. Just to talk through all our options, let's consider what would happen if we started on the opposite tack, on port. If we ask ourselves which tack is going to take us closest to the windward buoy, we can clearly see starboard is going to do that over port. So like we've said, this layout is always the ideal, the goal of the race committee, but we also all know that the wind change is rarely perfectly stable, which means that we're going to need to change our approach to match what the wind is doing. In this situation, we can see the wind is coming from the right side of the course. The general rule we want to remember is whatever side of the course the wind is coming from, that's the side of the line that's favored. So here the wind is coming from the right, so the right side of the line is once again favored. So position 1 is going to be best. Position 2 isn't bad, but once again, with the right being favored, the further left you move to position 3, the worse off you are. The next question to ask is what tack is favored. If we look roughly at our no-sail zone, we want to ask which tack is going to take us closest to the windward buoy, starboard or port. You can see that the starboard tack, the green arrow, should take us much more directly up our race course versus the port tack, which would take us more to the right side of the course. So the right side is favored, as is starboard tack. Once again, if we look at multiple boats on the line and imagine the windward buoy directly up the course, the boat on the far right will have the hypothetically best course, taking them most directly to the buoy. In this situation, we know the wind is coming from the left side of the course, which means the left side of the start line is favored, the side that we want to start on. Now we ask which tack is favored. So once again, looking at roughly where the no sail zone is, do we think the starboard or port tack will take us most directly up the course? The port tack, red arrow, is clearly pointing more directly up the course this time. So here's the ideal start position. Left side, port tack. If we draw the rest of the fleet off to the right, we can immediately see that they're on starboard tack, which means they have rights over us on port. But if we look again at the no sail zone, we know that we're sailing more up the course while they're sailing more off to the left. You can see here with all the boats sailing the exact same distance that our boat on the far left will have no problem passing in front of the rest of the fleet. What's more, because we're the most upwind boat in this situation, we should be in the cleanest air, which will give us even better chance of making good gains upwind. Now, if you're able to pull this off and port tack the fleet, that'll be awesome. It's all fine and good, but what if there's another boat right here, much closer than the rest of the fleet? We can see that they're also on starboard, which means that they have rights over us on port. They're also close enough to us that we likely don't have time or room to pass in front of them without fouling them. So what can we do in this situation? We still know the left side of the line is favored, but we can't start on port anymore. So what we're going to do is we're still going to start on the left side of the line, but now we're going to start on starboard with the rest of the fleet. This isn't as ideal, but it's easier to pull off and will still set us up for success. It's probably beneficial here to zoom out to see the full race course, as that will show us why starting this way is the best option. So the wind is still coming from the left. The windward buoy is directly upwind, and we're starting on the left side of the line, the favorite side, but on starboard. Watch what happens as all of the boats travel the same distance. The only difference is where they started on the line. You can see that boat 1's course is taking it closest to the buoy, and similar to before, because we're the boat that will be most upwind of the fleet, we should have the cleanest air, which means more opportunity to make gains up the course compared to the rest of the fleet. So to review, we know that if the wind is coming directly down the course, which is always the ideal, the right side of the line is favored, as is starboard tack. If the wind is coming from the right, that means the right side of the line is still favored, as is starboard tack. If the wind is coming from the left side of the line is favored, and port tack is. But if the rest of the fleet is too close for us to pull off starting on port, then we shift to starting on starboard. So now we know what to do, but how can we quickly determine where the wind is coming from before the race starts? There are a handful of tools we can use to do this. Firstly, we can be looking up the course at the puffs and the ripples on the water. Depending on the angle of the ripples to the start line, we can tell where the wind is coming from. So here, the wind is coming from the right side of the course. You can also look for the flags on the committee boat or the buoys, which are great indications of what the wind is doing right then and there. Here we can tell the wind is coming from the left side of the course. We can also use our boat as a tool to tell us where the wind is coming from. One option is to come up by the start line and turn up directly into the wind. The point at which your sail is luffing over the center line of the boat will tell you when you're dead into the no sail zone. So in this example, we can assume that the wind is coming slightly from the right side of the course. A second option is to come by the start line and find a close hauled course. This will give you a really clear picture of exactly where you can aim your boat, and then also where you'll be aiming on the opposite tack. So in this situation, based on where I'm pointing my bow while close hauled, we can assume the wind is coming directly down the course. If while close hauled, I'm pointing in this direction though, where do you think the wind will be coming from? I'd say the wind would probably be coming from the left side of the course. Similarly, if I point my bow in this direction while close hauled, I can assume the wind is coming from the right side of the course. Now let's run through a couple test examples. Here we have a start line scene right as the race starts. So firstly, can you tell based on the positioning where the wind is coming from? And secondly, Which boats do you think are in the best position based on the wind? I'll throw the flag in there as a hint. So in this situation, the wind is coming from the right, which means the right side is favored, as is starboard tack. So with that in mind, I'd say boat 6 is in the best position. Boat 5 is clear ahead, but will still be in 6's dirty air, and maybe boat 4's as well. Boat 4 isn't in an awful position, but also isn't sailing quite close hauled. Boat 3 is pretty far to the left and isn't on the line. Boat 1 and 2 are on the wrong side of the line and are about to foul boat 3. Okay, here's another race start. So ask yourself the same question. Where do you think the wind is coming from? And based on that, what boats do you think are in the best position? Here are the flags as a hint. So the wind is clearly coming from the left side now, which means the left side of the line is favored, as is port tack. So boat 6 and 5 are on the wrong side of the line. Boat 4 is in the middle, which isn't awful, but they also aren't close enough to the line. Boats 1, 2, and 3 have a whole lot going on. They're all on the left side, the favored side, which is good. Boat 1 tried to start on port tack, which once again is favored, but boat 2 is both ahead of them and on starboard, which means boat 1 mistimed their start and is now probably going to foul boat 2. Boat 3 is also starting on port tack, but timed it well enough that they're shooting the gap between boats 2 and 4. Being on port tack means boat 3 is aiming more up the course than any of the other boats, which is great. Boat 2 also knew the left side of the line was favored, but opted to start on starboard, which is the safest option. Once they tack over to port, they should be set up well to pass in front of the rest of the fleet and also be aiming well up the course. Hopefully this info can help you better understand and execute the race starts you're looking for. It goes without saying, and we all know, that the only constant when it comes to the wind is that it changes. So just know that what we've covered here is just a small part of the full picture of putting together a great race.